And welcome to this Pentecost Sunday, and greetings in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And um, I think my 5 hour show needs to be watched that I labored, and because I was accused of quote mining, and uh, so let's just point out some things. The the thumbnail to this video is of a famous scene, probably one of the most, in my opinion, uh, one of the cutest scenes in cinema. And so let me share it here. Hope you can see it. See if I can get a better. This is what's a little obnoxious about Microsoft Paint. It it doesn't have anything in the middle. Um, I can't make it get large nicely. So let's see. Okay, so this scene is from the movie Empire Strikes Back, and Han Solo is having an encounter with Princess Leia, and they're fighting over something, and he pulls her aside and says, "Come on, admit it. Sometimes you think I'm all right. Come on, admit it. Sometimes you think I'm all right." Then Princess Leia says, "Occasionally, maybe, when you aren't acting like a scoundrel." And then Han Solo says, "Scoundrel? Scoundrel? I like the sound of that." And then he kisses her. Beautiful scene. Beautiful scene. So, why did I bring this up? I know how some of these internet debates go. They're going to try to, they'll talk about my character. They may sincerely feel I'm a bad guy. But look, that's all fluff. Real issue is evolutionary theory good science? And it's not. That's the issue. It's not about whether Sal's a scoundrel. So my audience, assume for the sake of argument I'm all these bad things that people say. In the end, does that change the facts? No. The fact is, so-called natural selection, it's more appropriately called stupid selection destroys genomes. I'm just calling out the problem with that. Does it matter then if I'm a liar, or if certain friends of mine, my dear friends, are liars? That's all immaterial. And something I've been trying to point out to Dapper Dino, being mistaken is not a lie. You're just mistaken. If that were the standard of what constitutes a lie, then all of us are in pretty bad shape. I've been trying to tell Dapper, dude, you think you know a lot, and that evolutionary theory is good. There's a lot of facts you have not studied. I did a 5 hour show where people had accused me of quote mining Andreas Wagner. And I went to the original sources and I read it from top to bottom, from start to finish. Can you tell me, after I actually read the whole paper here on this channel, did you get the impression that evolutionary conceptions of fitness are credible? This is pathetic. I went, come on. Have you watched that? And Dapper Dino, if you haven't watched that, you need to. You need to study the papers that I put forward, because this is bad. Everything's moot. Calling me a liar, calling me all these names, calling my friends, that's not the issue. And God bless Mark O'Connell, Christian Carpenter. So I put in the video description a little history of me and Dapper Dino. In 2020, I was the #1 creationist on YouTube, and his panel voted me. And then in 2021, I did a show with him. I criticized creationist arguments. I spent 2 hours criticizing a creationist argument of entropy and second law thermodynamics. And even in that show, I said, my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Sanford, made a mistake. It's in his book. I have confronted him about it, but I don't think it's going to change his mind. He happens to have like 40 people that advise him. Yes, he's a very senior scientist. Look at the 120 or so papers he's published. Count the number of co-authors. That'll give you an idea of how many people he interacts with. He was also founder and president of Logos Research Associates. He knew 600 researchers, okay? So even though, yes, I was a paid research assistant, but I was not the only one. I think in my tenure, he's had like 10 other paid research assistants. I don't know. It's at least 3 or 4, maybe up to 10. I know them by name. You may see them. You kind of know who some of them might be just by looking at some of the co-authored papers. So, yeah. So there are things I will try to tell him. He may not agree, and the conversation's over in 5 minutes. So what do the conversations I have with him about? Well, in my 5-hour presentation, you're getting a taste of what we actually talk about. I don't spend my time telling him, I'd rather you change this about your book, change this about the way you present. I don't do that. I spend like what you saw in my video, my 5-hour video that I took time to make because I didn't like all these accusations that I was quote mining. I spend time sharing those things with him. I spend time sharing things about the complexity of collagen. He didn't hire me to go out there and start acting like an editor and pointing out what I think are mistakes in his presentations. The way that I gain his trust is to do what I did yesterday. Anyone watching that, both the first hour that was very accessible and then the next 4, which were very torturous. I don't know how you could watch that and think evolutionary theory is a good theory relative to other scientific disciplines. It is a garbage theory. And whether Jerry Coyne meant this or not, he actually said it like it is. So I'm going to concede. Maybe Jerry Coyne didn't really mean what, on face value, he said. I don't care, but he was accurate for a change. He said, in science's pecking order, evolutionary biology lurks somewhere near the bottom, far closer to phrenology than to physics. And sometimes I add, far closer to the pseudoscience of phrenology than to physics, because a lot of people don't know what phrenology is. So I encourage you to watch the first hour. And then I get a comment here from Breath of God, God bless you, that they were saying I was misrepresenting the paper. I'm like, dude, I mean, not Breath of Life, but guys, I showed the entire title. All I did was underline in red, genomes decay despite sustained fitness gains. Genomes decay despite sustained fitness gains. I gave you the whole title, and all I underlined is what I'm reading. It's not like I was hiding what the rest of the paper, what the rest of the title said. This is an open access paper. You can read it. It's embarrassing. How can Lenski be advertising this? Okay, not Lenski specifically. How can the evolutionary world be advertising this as some sort of, intuitive proof that organisms will evolve complexity over time when they're losing genes? They're losing genes. Okay, so it evolves citrate ability to digest citrate. That's why they call it the citrate mutant. It actually loses it does so by copying one component and just trashing another, and then it's able to consume. It just basically, when you hear like in these stories, go to manual override. Okay, it just overrided the way a regulatory circuit worked, and suddenly it's just reproducing away. But oh, there's the fine print. Genes being disabled. Genomes decay despite sustained fitness gains. Shouldn't that raise alarm bells that the whole concept of fitness is garbage? And then I went on to read 2 papers about that, one from start to finish, Ario and Lewontin. How can you walk away from that and think this is a good scientific theory? That's number one. And worse, if fitness gains and genomes decay, that is really bad. I went on not to, that's all moot because I cited a paper by Eugene Koonin, Genome Reduction as the dominant mode of evolution. I mean, do you guys not realize this is seriously bad for evolutionary theory? And then I cited another paper, Selection-Driven Gene Loss. Oh my goodness. Do you guys not get it? And then I went at the very end. I said, how do you evolve a collagen system? Look at all the post-translational modifications. You cannot look at the fossil record and talk about nested hierarchies and then say, oh, that explains it. I'm like, dude, that doesn't work. That's a non sequitur. And I pointed out even your friend, Aaron Ross Sewage. Yes, I do call people names. Sorry, that's kind of how I perceive him. Said, there's no effing common ancestor for all proteins. There is no effing common ancestor for all proteins. That wasn't me saying that. That was Aaron Ra. And then I pointed out one of those that don't have a common ancestor as far as we know, critical to the emergence of creatures with bones. You can't just look at the fossil record and say, oh, look, this evolved to that. That's true. And then you look at what's needed. I tried to point out, look at a collagen. It's going to be really hard. Why don't you look at it in detail? How can this process of destroying genes construct a collagen from scratch? Okay, you'll say, oh, it's not from scratch. All right. You tell me the parts that were imported and the parts that were brand new. How about you tell me how then the little parts that were novel evolved? I showed you the difficulty. You look at that. That's what I see. So if you wonder what Dr. Sanford and I talk about, it's stuff like that. I'm not going to, I will gain trust with him as I keep delivering quality stuff like that. I will lose trust with him if all I do is show the garbage that is on your channel, on Dapper Dino's channel. This is all, all that stuff's peripheral. The meat of what I presented yesterday is what I talk about. It's represented in papers that I co-authored with him and his colleagues. So now let's see what nice things Dapper Dino had to say. I went from number one creationist, and then I criticized other creationists for their arguments about the second law. He loved it. 2-hour show, gave me the platform. Okay, so now I get it. When I criticize other creationists, hey, Sal's a great guy. Sal's a great guy. And number one creationist. And when I criticize Kent Hovind, oh yeah, great guy, great character, just glowing praise. Sal's out there to get after bad guys. But then Dapper Dino did something I think was kind of not cool, to say the least. So I went on a 2-hour show in 2021, and I have a link there. And in that 2-hour show, I said, look, this is a bad creationist argument. I think Dr. Sanford is using it. I think he has to correct 2 pages in his book, and everything will be okay. I said, my responsibility is to try to protect him from criticism. But I said, the only way that I'm going to persuade him to change that is I have to go through his peers like Andy McIntosh, like Brian Miller at the Discovery Institute. Andy McIntosh is a professor of thermodynamics. I have to compete with someone like Werner Gitt. I have to compete with the information theorists in the ID community, and there are plenty of them. All right? So from Dr. Sanford's standpoint, Sal is overruled because there are 9 votes against his viewpoint and there's only mine. So if you're an executive of a company, which Dr. Sanford was, a very successful biotechnology company, why do you think he is being able to do a lot of philanthropy? When you have 9 advisors and they all agree that the one advisor is wrong, what are you going to do? And so, look, stuff that I would agree with Dapper Dino doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to persuade Dr. Sanford. That's the way it goes. The way to properly do this then is I've been trying to work with Dr. Andy McIntosh about second law. He's wanting me to write a paper with him. He's a professor of thermodynamics. I have a background in statistical mechanics and thermodynamics. If that gets published, maybe then Dr. Sanford will have higher regard for my criticism with respect to thermodynamics. But that's all immaterial if evolutionary theory is wrong. So what have I focused on? I've focused on the issues of fitness, the issues of evolvability. I've shown, and he was very impressed with the argument. I have shown and I've argued there's no universal common ancestor for all major protein families. That's a big deal, despite what evolutionary biologists say that it's not. It's laughable. They don't realize this is devastating. Look, you're not going to transition from a creature with no bones to bones that have collagen in them, unless you can evolve a collagen. He saw that diagram with all the post-translational modifications and all the complexities of creating a heterotrimer, and then all the post-processing. Yeah, you get the picture. Why are you looking at fossils and nested hierarchies? I already said, let's grant that. Let's even grant common descent. You have to explain the collagen. And as long as that persists, this is going to be really bad for your theory. I mean, you're going to end up having people like Michael Behe who accept common descent, but think evolutionary theory is very problematic. So, but yeah, best you can do is based on what is correct. Know the hill well enough to die on it before it, if need be. Yeah, it's not a hill to die on. So, number one, I did engage in argument, and I did disagree with my friend, mentor, and colleague, and former employer. I did publicly do that. So what does Dapper Dino do? He ends up making 3 shows, and I'll just show it to you. Gosh, this is disgusting. But what can I? I think this is really. I think this is just low. So I actually agreed with Dapper Dino that my dear mentor, friend, and colleague had made a mistake, especially about entropy. And I happen to have a background in statistical mechanics. Okay, so I have 5 degrees. 4 are accredited, 1 I just claim. Okay? Just so you know, bachelor's in computer science, bachelor's in electrical engineering, minor in music, bachelor's in mathematics, minor in physics from George Mason University, Master of Science in Applied Physics, Johns Hopkins University. Those are my 4 accredited degrees. My unaccredited, quote-unquote, degree that I claim is from the FAES graduate school at the NIH. They don't award degrees, but I feel I have taken enough classes and studied and published and worked in laboratories. I'm just going to claim it. If you don't like that, okay, then just give me 4 science degrees instead of 5. And so, okay, so I have background in thermodynamics. I have background in information theory. I have background in biology. I published in biology. I have background in physics. This is all relevant to the question of entropy and evolution. And I went because I'm concerned that creationists are making bad arguments. I went on Dapper Dino's channel. He welcomed me with open arms, and I just criticized this creationist argument for 2 hours. He was happy. I disagreed with my friend, mentor, and former boss, and he's still my friend, John Sanford. So he can't say I didn't engage the argument. I actually agreed with him. So how does he stab? How am I rewarded for doing this? He goes after John Sanford this way. You see, I don't know if you could see it. I'm sorry if it's kind of small. He says, entropy disproves evolution if I lie enough. He put a little, okay, it's right here. He put this little bubble thing and pointed it right to John Sanford. And he says specifically Sal's pal. Sal's pal. He says Sal's pal is a liar, basically. And I objected. I said, dude, that is not cool to do that. That is not cool. I made a 2-hour video on his channel. I actually criticized other creationists, including my friend, because I felt it didn't serve my friend well to make that argument. But I tried to explain, look, he can make these mistakes. And look who's here. Thank you for watching. Because, dude, that wasn't cool. That was not cool. That was not cool, dude. I was on your channel, and I'm so glad you're here, because I was on your channel for 2 hours criticizing a creationist argument. You welcomed me with open arms. And I said, Dr. Sanford's mistaken. But then you're going to go here and turn around and call him a liar for that. You need to learn some stuff, dude. Because if you make a mistake, I don't call you a liar for that. And you persist in your mistakes. You think evolutionary theory is good. You think evolutionary theory is good. Do I call you a liar for promoting this nonsense? No. People, there's a cultural momentum. There are things that people have devoted themselves to, and they make mistakes, and sometimes the mistakes stay with them for a long time. Doesn't make them a liar. And I don't know why that's so hard to conceive of, Dapper Dino. There have been things that I have been mistaken about for years, and I've promoted it, and someone comes along, and it takes a long time. So I will, I said one way maybe to fix this is work with people like Andy McIntosh and maybe perhaps Dave Snoke. I haven't approached him yet. I may see him in Dallas, perhaps. They have published in thermodynamics and talked to some of the information theorists. There's going to be a conference coming up. So yes. And then look, this is kind of galling. Let me just show this. It says, when in doubt, just lie. Darwin was big dumb. Okay, so what do I have to say? I already said, hey, look, I'm going to grant for the sake of argument, he said things that were wrong. Doesn't make him a liar. Because look, I could go for years highlighting all the mistakes you made, Dapper Dino, and calling you a liar. I don't do that. I was hoping you'd spend time actually studying carefully the peer-reviewed papers that I read on my channel that are written by evolutionists that are critical of evolutionary theory. So, dude, that just wasn't cool. And I said, I'm saying, look, you could be right about the mistakes. The issue is you're calling my friend a liar. You're like making him out to be like Kent Hovind. And I've gone after Kent Hovind, but this is a different story. He's a far more accomplished scientist than most of the people talking on the YouTube sphere. He's not a liar. And the one reason I know he's not, as far as this goes, is evolutionary theory destroys itself on its own merit. We don't have to lie. All I did yesterday, dude, was just read literature from your side of the aisle. And it was painful for anyone who believes in evolutionary theory. These are kind of like set aside papers. But I tend to, my job is to read these carefully. And dude, it looks bad. If you can watch that for 5 hours and still believe what you do, it's like, okay, you know, you're committed. You're a believer. You're not really doing this out of science. You've traded one religious view of creationism for another, for Darwinism. But this isn't about science. This is not about science. And I pointed that out. 5 hours. So, dude, I'm just saying, a mistake is not a lie. But you had that narrative, and you put my name on it. So why don't I just share what lovely things you had to say about me? You know, you had lovely things to say in 2020, Sal, #1 creationist. Invite me to criticize the second law of thermodynamic arguments that creationists make, and I sided with you. And then I sided with you in criticizing Kent Hovind. Then, gee, once it starts to get little home, hitting home, where does this go? So let's just take a look at where this goes. Let me just show you. For a while, Sal Cordova of Evidence and Reason seemed to have cleaned up his act from his time on Reddit, where he was commonly known as Slimy Sal for his blatant quote mining. Where he was commonly known as Slimy Sal for his blatant quote mining, refusal to engage in meaningful dialogue and rudeness. Essentially, Reddit Sal was just Donnie SFT with more education. Hey, well, thank you for acknowledging I have more education than SFT. Thank you very much. After giving him many opportunities to watch the videos of mine he is purported to respond to, he admits not having watched them. Yes, I have not watched that because a mistake isn't a lie. Intentionally so. Yes, intentionally. And I'll tell you why I did that intentionally. Yesterday afternoon before my stream with Zach, Sal had already... No, that's not exactly right. Yesterday afternoon before my stream with Zach. No, that is not true. I did it during his stream. There's a slight... Toward the end, the stream started at about 3 p.m. At least that's what was scheduled. And I said, I'll give you 2 hours. And then it was 5:15. I had a co-host that was called at the last minute, and I wanted to respect her time. That was Rebecca Davis. And I said, look, we'll give it 15 minutes and then we'll start because, you know, we shouldn't just wait. So, you know, out of respect for her. So I started the show at 5:15. So it's not like I precluded everything. Zach had plenty of time to make his point. So just pointing that out, Dapper Dino, but I'm not going to call you a liar for misrepresenting. I'm not going to return like the way you behave. But anyway, let's continue on. Sal had already started, before my stream with Zach, Sal had already started what would end up, see, okay, that's not true, but I'm not going to call you a liar for your mistake like you do other people. Sal had already started what would end up being a nearly 5-hour response stream, which is what he's talking about in this screenshot. I'm not angry at Sal. This is pretty typical yet behavior. I am, however, disappointed that someone I tried to have a high opinion of, whom I had just private chats with, whom I've even collaborated with more than once, has just regressed to the slime ball he was. Sal has regressed to the slime ball he was. And I just think about that quote. I just, you know, that just gives me this impression here. Scoundrel, Scoundrel. I like the sound of that. Scoundrel, Scoundrel. I like the sound of that. All right, guys. I mean, okay. Sal has... Sal has regressed to the slime ball he was years ago, when his default debate tactic was to lie about scientific paper and call people names. Oh yes, I do call people names, like even creationists. I think it's an appropriate description. Um, don't don't go harass Sal over this, but feel free to respectfully let him know what a bad look this is. Okay, so this is an example of Dapper Dino. Uh, feel free to let feel feel free to respectfully let him know what a bad look this is. And so this is Dapper Dino's example of a respectfully letting me know that I'm a scoundrel, that I'm a slime ball. Yeah, this is how Dapper wishes. Is this your example of being respectful to me, Dapper Dino? Call me a slime ball, and let's come over and just respectfully know Sal's behaving like a slime ball, and this is how you do it. You try to mock me and say, "Cry harder, Sal." So okay, so all right, enough. I'm sorry. I was just looking at the chat. Uh, so okay, so feel free to respectfully let him know what a bad look this is. Okay, so you're calling me regressing to be a slime ball, and you come over here, Dapper Dino, and you show how to be. You show him how it's done to be respectful to me. Yeah, this is how you do it. Okay, guys. So this is an example of trying to let me know that respectfully that I'm a slime ball. Just you come over here and said, "Cry harder, Sal. Cry harder." So, all right. Yeah, I'm rude. I'm rude. You know, I don't feel obligated to be nice to whom I consider bad actors. I mean, that seems kind of immoral, actually, to just slobber over someone and show them just, you know, way too much grace than I think is appropriate. So, yeah, I'm rude. I'm rude to bad guys. I'm rude to bad guys. No question about it. And there are a lot of bad guys on the internet. I will call them names. So, yeah, so he says, refusal to engage in meaningful dialogue. So now let's just talk about this. What is meaningful dialogue? Who decides what's meaningful? If you decide that I have to talk about, this, a slide presentation of some other creationist, that's meaningful dialogue. I'm like, uh, who are you to tell me that's meaningful? I thought what I talked about was way more meaningful. I mean, don't you want to learn about how fitness fails? So why don't we just cover here, as I thought this morning what this is all about. I'm just gonna, because I was accused of quote mining this. So this is Michael van der Graaf, a atomic physicist, said, "Why are you quote mining them?" And okay, look, unless I read the whole paper, then I'm not going to be. Is that what I have to do to avoid the accusation of quote mining? Well, why don't I just read the section that I was talking about? I'll just read it again. It's worth it because this is the central issue, dude. This is one of the central issues. You're not going to get away from it. This is what meaningful dialogue is about. See, your definition of meaningful dialogue, it seems to me, is like, oh, we can have meaningful dialogue when I agree with you and I'm bashing other creationists. Then you're happy with me. But once I start confronting you about your mistakes, it's like, oh, you're avoiding meaningful dialogue. The first mistake you made, sir, is you're equating mistakes with lies. You're doing that a lot. It's not the same thing because, dude, if I did that to you, it'd look pretty bad. And I'm not going to do that to my pal. My pal. So let's look at this here. This is from Andreas Wagner. Robustness, evolvability, and neutrality. It's worth reading again. You want to have a meaningful dialogue? I'm not going to be talking about what this creationist said or that creationist said. Let's see. Reference 12. First, how can we determine whether a mutation does not affect fitness? Beyond the commonplace that fitness means the ability to survive and reproduce, fitness is difficult to define properly and nearly impossible to measure rigorously. To give a simple example, laboratory evolution experiments in microbes often use cell division rates of bacterial strains as an indicator of fitness. While growth rate is certainly an important aspect of fitness, a myriad other equally important aspects exist, including survival under starvation conditions, heat resistance, sporulation efficiency, germination rates, and so on. In addition, growth rates themselves could be measured in countless different laboratory experiments. Which of these would be most representative of the environments a microbe encountered in its recent evolutionary past? The answer is usually unknown and perhaps often unknowable. Such problems are exacerbated in higher organisms where sexual reproduction, age-specific mortality and fertility, an increased ability to change the environment, and smaller population sizes pose daunting principal and technical problems. Taken together, these difficulties mean that an unassailable measurement of any organism's fitness does not in practice exist. An unassailable measurement of any organism's fitness does not in practice exist. And let me show you where I had a you had to mention Swampy Das here. So who defines meaningful debate? I'm not going to debate like it. Meaningful debate are the key issues about what will make evolutionary theory succeed or fail. You're talking about creationists, like the whole channel. I mean, you look at all the stuff on Dapper's channel, so much stuff focusing on these scoundrel creationists. You know what meaningful is? You're going to debate your own theory, and you're not doing that, Dapper Dino. That's meaningful debate. You want me to focus on this guy or that guy and talk about that he's a scoundrel? I'll say, okay, look, I'm a scoundrel. I like the sound of that too. Does that change anything? Look at your own theory. I'm giving you stuff by other evolutionary biologists about your own theory. So Michael Van de Graaff. I should know that. There's a Van de Graaff generator. Michael Van de Graaff said, you're quote mining that. And I said, no, I'm not. He said, but they believe evolution. I said, yeah, it's kind of amazing that people could see all the flaws in their theory and they still believe it. I call that religion. I don't call that science. That's faith-based. Hey, that's okay. I'm a religious person. I'm just pointing out these are religious people too. So I'm a religious person. I have faith. I have faith in things I can't prove, and I have faith in things that, there are problems to it, but I the reasons I'll still believe it. And it's like, well, these guys, they have all these problems, and I think they're deal breakers, but hey, maybe they're hoping they'll find some solution to all this. But it ain't looking good as the years pass by. It looks worse and worse. So let me explain a little bit about what fitness is, because this goes back to Fisher's fundamental theorem of natural selection. Fisher's fundamental theorem of natural selection. It doesn't go back to it, but we get a key we get kind of a hint of the mentality. So in Fisher's viewpoint, his fundamental theorem says, look, fitness is always increasing. Fitness is always increasing. And he likened it to the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, so in today's world, we tend to equate thermodynamics, the creationists tend to equate the spread of entropy as destroying organisms. So Fisher said of his theorem, this is like the second law of thermodynamics, where entropy is always increasing. And he said fitness is always increasing. And he related the variance in the fitness with the change in mean fitness. I think I got that right. It's been about 2 years since I did the proof of the discrete version. I used to know it by heart, but the way I learn new things is to forget old things. Like I've been studying other math since then, and I end up, I don't have enough memory, so I end up losing how I did it. I have a published paper on Fisher's not so fundamental theorem where I actually, just as an educational exercise, go through the proof. Then I show, yes, fitness is always increasing. And I could see how Fisher was like, oh, this is marvelous. Fitness always increases. Fitness always increases. That, just like entropy, it always increases. This is so fundamental. And he was able to relate the variance with the mean of this thing called fitness. And so if fitness is always increasing, that's the thing Darwin was trying to prove, that things will naturally evolve to organs of extreme perfection and complication. Origin of Species, Chapter 6. Organs of extreme perfection and complication. So fitness increases, and in Darwin's mind, it was not well defined what fitness was, and it's still not well defined. To him, fitness was how you are in relation to organs of extreme perfection and complication. So the more closer you are to an organ of extreme perfection and complication, the more fit you were. And Ronald Fisher said, look, my theorem proves that fitness always increases. Do you see there's a little flaw here? First off, Fisher's definition of fitness was not Darwin's. And I went to great pains to show Lewontin finally figured that out. Why don't I just bring up the paper where he figured that out? So I'm adding a little more insight to what happened yesterday that I was describing. And let me see if I could find it. Lewontin. Well, why don't I get this paper? There is a published version of this paper, but he basically says that Darwin, and unfortunately the language got thick because he had a co-author, a philosopher co-author. Let me see. Let me search on the word bypassed. It's in his other work. Let me find that other work. If you'll give me a moment, I will find it. For complications. I apologize. So this was impromptu. I wasn't expecting today to have to deal with someone saying I've regressed into a slime ball and come over here and say, cry harder, Sal. So Lewontin rightly observed see if I can find it now. Bypass. Yes. Okay. I'm just trying to highlight. This is what we call in rhetoric equivocation. Fitness, and it can be deliberate or accidental. So fitness in Fisher's view is reproductive abundance. And in modern articulations of the Fisher's theorem, Fisher's fundamental theorem of natural selection ties fitness to reproductive abundance. Darwin's idea, not that he's the most clear in writing, it appears that fitness is, you measure it in relation to these organs of extreme perfection and complication, because the idea, if you read it, it's all metaphorical language. So there's equivocation where, it's defined one way in one context, and then defined another way in another context. And what you do is you kind of bait and switch the way it's being used. And that's, I'm not saying in Fisher's case this is deliberate, but I can kind of see that he's thinking, oh, fitness naturally keeps growing. Therefore, Darwin was right. It's going to inevitably lead to organs of extreme perfection and complication. And Fisher said this is the central theorem of biology. He said this is the central theorem of biology. Now, because of Fisher's stature, that myth was accepted by a lot of people, even to this day, including Richard Dawkins. For 80 years, people have gone around being mistaken. I emphasize again, that doesn't make them liars. Like the way Dapper Dino likes to do business. If they're mistakes, he'll pounce on it and say they're a liar. Now he's doing that to me. So, hey, I could be, but you see, that's all inconsequential. Anyway, it's an equivocation. So what I'm trying to show is this right here. Let me increase. Right there. Darwin's sense of fit has been completely bypassed. Repeat again. Darwin's sense of fit has been completely bypassed in evolutionary literature, at least in population genetics. So you have one group of evolutionary biologists operating on one definition or conception of fitness, and that would be Richard Dawkins. And you have another group of evolutionary biologists that operate on another definition. And you could clearly see that if you're looking carefully. These guys they can't get their definitions right. So you end up with stupid situations, embarrassing situations, where it says genomes decay despite sustained fitness gains. Genomes decay despite sustained fitness gains. Or selection-driven gene loss in bacteria. Selection-driven gene loss. Selection increases fitness by destroying genes. And you're like, do you not see there's a little problem here? You have one group of biologists think, oh, fitness increase means complexity increase. And another group of biologists are like, well, we don't care about complexity. We just reproductive schedules. And Lewontin's essay was about that. And if you think I'm mischaracterizing this, I'm going to give you the paper that I read from. That's why it was a 5-hour show, because I actually read the whole paper. And just to show, you cannot read that and not agree that my characterization was pretty straightforward. It's not entirely clear what fitness is. That was the whole point. And I read that whole paper from start to finish because Lewontin gives brutal examples why it is confused. Why don't I just read what he had to say and just go to the bottom line of, let me see if I have it. The bottom line here, the beginning. Let's go here. Any attempt to introduce a unitary analogous concept of reproductive fitness into dynamical models is a scalar ordinal, which will explain or predict quantitative changes in the frequency of types, must fail. Now, unfortunately, this isn't the most straightforward English. But he points out there is no way you could say one organism is more fit than another in the absence of any other information, because an organism in one environment could be more fit than another organism in that environment. You change environments and it's reversed. The reason that's problematic is like in thermodynamics, in the second law, entropy will always increase. Entropy will always increase um, uh, until it goes to equilibrium. That's roughly saying entropy increases. But here it is. If your environment changes, it's like, well, fitness, suddenly the definition of fitness just changes because of your environment. This is a very undesirable quality, because if you're trying to say fitness as far as Darwin conceived of it, going ever more toward complexity, and I think Lewontin just kind of gets some of this a little bit wrong, because clearly Darwin is trying to say fitness. He doesn't use specifically the word fitness. He uses the word fit or fit test. Okay. It naturally, inevitably heads toward organs of extreme complication, perfection and complication. And then all we do is we look at examples where something quote unquote adapts. And we'll say, hey, look, that kind of proves since things adapt, they're going to, the insinuation, it's a false insinuation, is that since things adapt, they're going to inevitably become organs of extreme perfection and complication. The explanation for complexity. So, of course, you have kind of the other group of evolutionists who have a different story. They say, oh, this is all bad design, like Jerry Coyne. He said the eye is badly designed. And it's laughable now. The physicists have gotten him on that, because he said the backward wired retina is bad design, and that's not true. It's been falsified. As far as I know, he hasn't retracted that. So, so this is the central issue. Does fitness naturally keep increasing to organs of extreme perfection and complication? Because, all right, so let's remove the word perfection, because that's a little bit of a metaphysical word. We can change it with optimal for certain capabilities, such as the eye is, William Bielek at Princeton showed the eye is, the implementations of the eye from the insect to other creatures like human beings, the construction is optimal with respect to geometric optics. So, an eye that's out of focus isn't operating optimally. So we have metrics to say if something is quote unquote perfect, but the better characterization is it at the limit? Is it operating at the limit of what's possible by physics? So you can't, like the eye cannot detect anything less than 1 photon, because either below that you have 0 photons. So the human eye, he demonstrated it is sensitive enough to see 1 photon. It's a beautiful lecture that I had on this channel. I took that video and presented it here on this channel because it's so critical to understanding. Yes, we can kind of, he actually uses the title, more perfect than we imagine, more perfect than we imagine. So the metaphysical word perfect, it's hard to run away from that as you actually look at kind of the objective measures of what we consider optimal. It's astonishing. So this idea of organisms in the environment that exist naturally evolving to that's kind of like, well, that would work if you could distinguish fit in a way that's not environmentally dependent. Because once it becomes environmentally dependent, it's like, well, we don't know what the environments are, therefore we don't know if it's going to move this way. Now contrast this to the second law of thermodynamics, where we don't have to have the specific details of the environment. We don't have to have the specific details of the objects involved. If you have one hot object touching a cold object, there'll be a heat transfer, and entropy will increase in that system of the two bodies in contact. So a basic thermodynamic analysis that's done in like statistical mechanics and thermodynamics, and I still remember this. I was upset at my professor. He didn't like my proof. It was mathematically sound, but he didn't like that. He said, okay, you have a hot brick and a cold brick. Show that when you put the two bricks together and the new system boundary is the two bricks, show that entropy increases. And I came up with the answer. And he said, he didn't like the form of my proof. It was mathematically sound, though, because it gave the right answer. It shows entropy increases. I don't like that. I'm still upset about that. But you see, that'll be true whether it's bricks or anything else. You don't need a lot of details. You don't even need a lot of details about the external environment. And you'll keep seeing that entropy increases here. In so many instances, you do not need to have details about the system to say entropy will increase in the system if it's not in equilibrium. You can't do that with fitness. That if you had a fitness that had that property that it would just increase like entropy increases, then you have a legitimate theory. I know that's horrifying to think that Fisher thought that way back in the 1930s, 20s, because that's the total opposite now. We've kind of been in a culture where entropy is bad. In Fisher's view, he was likening the inevitable rise of entropy like the inevitable rise of fitness. So, let's see. Let me just make sure I'm characterizing this right. So Fisher's fundamental theorem, natural selection, second law. Let's look, because I want to get this right. Oh, it's somewhere. I'm sorry. Man, I had everything all laid out. This happened upon, this show happened upon me because I felt I had to respond because someone's saying I'm a slime ball and I regressed into a slime ball. I'm saying, look, that doesn't matter in the spice of things, but I wanted to at least respond to my fan club here, who I'm very grateful to have. And oh, here it is. Remo. All right. So this was from the Springer Nature chapter I co-authored. It is long. Okay, so Richard Price's paper, 1972, reviewing the historical evaluation of Fisher's fundamental theorem as follows. It has been long a mystery of how Fisher derived the famous fundamental theorem of natural selection and exactly what he meant by it. He compared this result to the second law of thermodynamics and describing it as holding the supreme position among the biological science. Also, he spoke of the rigor of his derivation of the theorem and of the ease of its interpretation. He compared this result to the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, so this is where I got that. All right. So I'm assuming I'm going to say I'm going out a little bit on a limb here and saying I'm interpolating this to mean, okay, the second law of thermodynamics, heat goes from hot to cold, or also you could say entropy increasing. There are ways you could frame this, use the Clausius integral, etc. Okay. So I haven't bothered to read the genetical theory of natural selection or whatever that publication was, where he might have actually said it, or where he got these things where he's likening his own theorem. He said, this theorem I created is holding the supreme position among the biological sciences. And of course, just go ask biologists, tell them what's the central theorem of biology. I mean, according to Fisher, it's his, but no one in practice says that, except Dawkins. Oh my goodness, Dawkins says it's biology's central theorem. And as I said, I worked on recapitulating that proof. And now I can actually read my own symbols now. It's like I said, I've forgotten even the proof when I had gone through the discrete version of the proof. And it is here somewhere. This is a long chapter. Oh my goodness. So people know about things like variance and mean. So now I actually understand the symbols. So this is the change in the mean from the prior generation. Or see the change in mean fitness from generation K to K plus 1. Okay, so you can even do this forward looking. So in the next generation, so K plus 1, so delta WK is the change in fitness from the current generation to the next. You can also do it backward looking. And it says the variance in the present generation predicts the change of fitness from the present to the future. And then it's scaled to the mean fitness of today. So that's the discrete version. The continuous version is like this, right there. That's the continuous version. And then Bill Basner, when you add mutations, and yes, Fisher didn't have mutations in his model, by the way. In his central theorem of biology, he didn't include mutations. Yes, I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't be irreverent. Fisher's a great guy. And when we add the mutations, I'll show you just so you see the form of this. This is painful. The new form of Fisher's theorem is this here. So the old form is if you just take this part here, dm over dt equals var m. When you add mutations, you get this monstrosity here. That's what Bill Basner added. It led to publication in the Journal of Mathematical Biology, and that paper was the most read, downloaded by large margin. It set records. It led to us being invited to write this Springer Nature reference chapter. And well, thank you for visiting. And I think there are some. Let me just go by and say hi to everyone. So since we have a new visitor, the recap, the simple point is we were trying to find out if fitness, what they call fitness, if things naturally evolve to ever-increasing complexity. It turns out all experiments and theory now predict that the natural tendency is toward simplicity and loss of genes. And I have cited that. And after doing that, I've been called a slime ball and a liar, all sorts of vile things on the internet. And I'd like to thank Dapper Dino for bringing attention to my work, because it's better to be criticized than ignored. And however I could be of service to homeschoolers, I have had homeschool moms on the show and homeschool parents, and it's been a privilege. I don't like to deal with kids personally. I do like to teach the teachers that I once went to a homeschool co-op, and I just felt really uncomfortable being around all these youngsters. But I could counsel how to teach things more effectively. So that is where I feel my role is most effective. Unfortunately, a lot of what I focus on is professional level literature. I am going to a conference where practically all my audience will either be PhD professors, researchers, or medical doctors. You get the picture. So that's kind of the audience where my work is focused on. I have had, since Karen is new here, let me just recommend, I'm very grateful for especially meeting homeschool parents. I did a show with a homeschool mother, and so the evidences for the Christian faith are along 4 axes: Christian testimony of how Jesus has changed their lives and answered prayer; creation science. I'm a young earth creationist, intelligent design advocate. I'm fine with Christians who believe the earth is old, because I was there. I used to believe in evolutionary theory till I saw what a disaster it was, and I'm happy to share the reasons why. That's been the focus of this channel so far. And archaeology. I know a guy who became a Christian because he came to a sermon and he heard about Hezekiah's tunnels. Hezekiah's tunnels. He accepted Jesus as Lord and Savior because as he heard about Hezekiah's tunnels, he said, the Bible must be true. This seems like reporting. So let me see here. Hang on. I'll give you a little gem just as a bonus, since you're a first-time visitor. There's a show I did on Christian testimonies, and let me just share that with you right now. Because the reason I'm doing that, I don't want you to be scared away, because we do get into some really technical stuff. This is a very technical subject, but here you go, Karen. And I did a show with my frequent co-host, Rebecca Davis. She's a Christian wife and mother, and occasional homeschooler. Her kids were eventually sent off to public school. They're all, one of them's already at college age. So I don't want you to think all the stuff we talk about here is of this nerd level. But that being said, I'm going to continue on, unfortunately, with where I was. And this is going to be painful. It says, Darwin's sense of fit has been completely bypassed. Darwin's sense of fit has been completely bypassed. And as I demonstrated it, I went to paper after paper, written by evolutionary biologists themselves, that demonstrated that the definition of fitness is dependent on the environment. That's a very bad quality. Oh, Karen, if you're still there, let me recommend one thing if you want to hear about evolutionary biology and why it's bad. I think this is a pretty good argument, and I'm going to share it with you. If you can hang on for maybe just 1 second, actually more like 30, depending on how slow the internet is. This, my show here with Rebecca yesterday is, let's see, I'm copying it. Try this one. This link, the first hour is kind of for homeschool moms. The other 4 hours are for PhDs. So if you want to see how I argue evolutionary theory against it, just go to that. Thank you for the support. And by the way, this show is about how the evolutionists are calling liars a liar and a slime ball. So I hope you don't mind that I'm being a scoundrel here in their eyes. So anyway, God bless you. Thank you for visiting. So let's go back then to Darwin's sense of fit has been bypassed. So Lewontin goes on in this publication in the SFI Bulletin, Work in Progress 2003. And he uses all these terms, and like, I wish he would explain it more, like that's either 1x or LX. So in statistics, they have these things called indicator functions, where it's one subscript something, and it's not really the number one or something like that. I'm not really familiar with indicator functions. So I don't know if that's a 1x or LX. And I went to the original document that elaborates on this more in this one, Fitness Confusions. But the bottom line is, the reason I read this from start to finish was to show I was not quote mining when I said fitness is hard to define, even more difficult to measure, but it really all boils down to the fact that it's situation specific. Whereas the second law and the entropy rise is not situation specific. You can count on it wherever you go. You know, if something's hot, something's cold, you put them in contact. The internal energy in form of heat transfers from the hot to the cold. You don't need a lot of details. And then entropy increases in that system, in that new system. So it's desirable then if fitness were like that quantity and fitness kept increasing throughout the universe, then you'd start developing organs of extreme complication and perfection and complication. Later on, as the years went by, probably because of Duane Gish, he was saying, no, entropy destroys complexity. And I said, that's a bad argument, but it probably was in the right direction, but it missed the mark. Disorganization might be a better way of describing it. Loss of complexity. You don't have to invoke the second law of thermodynamics, because the second law, entropy is defined by both position and momentum. And that makes this kind of a mess, because you don't actually need to include momentum terms in this analysis of complexity. And I did a 2-hour show, why not to use the second law as an argument. So the way that the second law was used earlier by Fisher is totally reversed in the current environment. And both Fisher, the evolutionist, and creationist got that wrong as they were discussing the second law. And we're still trying to sort out this mess. Oh my goodness. And statistical mechanics is hard. It is known as sadistical mechanics. By the students, by physics students, we call it sadistical mechanics. So anyway, Dapper, I hope you've learned something about your sorry theory. You're an evolution evangelist, and I know it's kind of hard to realize you've been promoting stupidity. And I get that, and you're taking it out on me, but you're still my pal. Despite the fact you've called me a liar and a slime ball. Okay, just to rehearse again, let's look at all the sweet things my pal has had to say about me. I'm sorry. This is so funny. What has my pal had to say about me? And he kept saying, cry harder, Sal, cry harder. So, okay. What has he had to say? What has my pal had to say about me? Oh boy, this is what I hate. I have so many windows open, I can't keep track. But I just want to see it. I just want to hear these sweet words from Dapper Dino. Thank you for dropping in and just telling me to cry harder. It just kind of makes me laugh. So let me just show. Look at all the sweet things my pal had to say about me. Slimy Sal. Slimy Sal is back. Slimy Sal is back. And he says, I've regressed to the slime ball I was years ago. And I lie. And I do call people names. I don't feel any obligation to call bad guys nice things. So yes, I do. And I'm rude to bad guys. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of treating bad guys the way they deserve. So, unfortunately, you think you hang around good guys, Dapper Dino. Some of the crowd you hang around are not good actors. Just, that's not a word of advice. That's just a mean criticism. The company you keep is kind of questionable for, as far as some of the crowd you hang up with. Hey, but look, you hung out with me and you called me a slime ball. And you loved me until I started criticizing you. I was the best thing since sliced bread. And then, Dapper doesn't even follow his own advice here. Um, he says, Don't don't go and harass Sal. And then he comes over here and says, Cry harder, Sal, cry harder. So, well, thank you for all the attention you've showered me with and calling me a slime ball. I hope people visit my site because maybe maybe a few of them will see the truth that evolutionary theory is a disaster. So I would like to thank you for drawing attention. And Breath of God is here. Here is a fine gentleman. By the way, have you graduated? Let me ask. Have you graduated? I'm sorry if I'm. Uh, Breath of God is a student, and he studies biology. I'm so proud of him. And all right, we'll break out the champagne. Maybe you're too young to drink champagne since you're in high school. How about sparkling cider? We'll break out the sparkling cider for you. God bless you, sir. And thank you for watching this channel. Um, and Breath of God was concerned about some things. I said, look, just assume that I'm all the awful scoundrelly things, and I'm a slime ball and a liar and a scoundrel. And scoundrel. I like the sound of that. That's irrelevant. If I've said something poorly, misrepresented, those are all peripheral issues. I appreciate that some people want to come to my defense. I really am grateful for that. But the central issue is, did God create or did he not? If it looks like they're signatures of the supernatural, then there has got to be a God. There's got to be a God. My former pastor, Lon Solomon, was an atheist. He studied enzymes, and he said there's got to be a God. He went on to become a pastor of a small church and built it to be a mega church. It was wonderful. So anyway, that's the real issue. The real issue, it's not about whether Sal or anyone else is a liar. It's whether there is a creator, God, and whether he has shown us subtly, because it says in Proverbs 25:2, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, it's the glory of kings to search it out. I've tried to search it out. That is the glory. It is the king's quest. So it's the glory of believers to search this out. I've searched it out in this painful literature of evolutionary biology. It's some of the most awful stuff I've ever seen, trying to discern whether it has contradicted itself. And I think I've successfully demonstrated evolutionary theory does not stand because of self-contradiction. It's a disaster of a theory. It's pathetic. It's destroying people's faith. I'm happy to highlight why. And that's what really counts. You can decide for yourself, given that we've had numerous now experiments showing that so-called natural selection, which is better called stupid selection, destroys genes. It does not lead to complexity. The idea of fitness and evolution is so poorly formed that it is next to worthless, because if it's dependent on the environment and the environment was uncertain, you're saying uncertainty leads to certainty. And the only places that sort of works is if you say uncertainty leads to more uncertainty, then that's kind of like thermodynamics, which isn't really helpful. Uncertainty will not tell you that something will naturally become more complex. This is like, as Hoyle pointed out, metaphorically, this is like running a tornado through a junkyard and arguing kind of like the more that the tornado keeps spinning and disorganizing parts, it's going to make a 747. And I've criticized that argument. So this is what it's all about. Because if things do not spontaneously go toward organs of extreme perfection and complication, as Darwin had beautifully described, but he had the wrong cause. If they don't go there spontaneously, then what caused it? What caused it? And Richard Dawkins, who's an atheist, rightly pointed out, if you don't have an explanation for that, it's hard to be an atheist. It's hard to, as he said, it was difficult to, before that, it'd be difficult to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. And Darwin's stupid theory kind of made atheists have the illusion they could be intellectually fulfilled. I'm extrapolating what he wrote. That's not an exact quote, but just go to that passage. Oh, well, speaking of which, why don't I happen to have what Richard Dawkins had. And oh, by the way, if Darwinists like Michael Roos have actually said their own theory, Darwinism is religion. But let me, as I close here on this Pentecost Sunday, I think I have the quote somewhere. Intellectually fulfilled atheist. Do I have it? This is version 2. Or is Hoyle in the junkyard? This is the quote. Yes. And Mark O'Connell is the pilot, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, you get it. So just let me read this. This is what this is about. An atheist before Darwin could have said, following Hume, I have no explanation for complex biological design. All I know is that God isn't a good explanation. So we must wait and hope that somebody comes up with a better one. I can't help feeling that such a position, though logically sound, would have left one feeling pretty unsatisfied. And although atheism might have been logically tenable before Darwin, Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Okay, so there, I did my penance and read it the way it is. Richard Dawkins said, Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. Well, my spin on this is that would be the case if Darwin were right, but he's wrong. He's wrong. Darwin is wrong. So I'm just going to correct. I'm just going to correct what Dawkins here said in light of what we know now. Darwin made it possible to have the illusion of being an intellectually fulfilled atheist. That's what this is about. Stupid natural selection being advertised as intelligent selection is a delusion. What happens in nature is stupid selection. And that's why, comically, yesterday I covered the example of an evolutionary biologist saying PMS is an adaptation. Premenstrual syndrome is an adaptation. It's reproductively advantageous for women to have premenstrual syndrome where they get kind of all hissy or whatever, okay? And headachy and pain. That's an adaptation. That's an evolutionary improvement. And then the book Survival of the Sickest. So this is what it's all about. And Dapper Dino, if you bother to listen to this and you still believe in your sorry theory, I'm not going to call you a liar and idiot like you do other people. But just apply that standard to yourself. And that's how I see you. That's how I see you. Someone who is deeply mistaken. And if you apply that standard to yourself, your words have basically the way you treat other people, you're going to reap what you sow. I'm not going to say that, but I'm not going to use those labels on you, but I'll let you use those labels on yourself. Because if you think you know biology and evolution and you think you have good proofs for it, you don't. It's pathetic, your level of knowledge and the stuff you focus on. You're an example of confirmation bias, dude. You just focus on what makes you help you believe. So, you went from being a believer in creationism to a believer in Darwinism. You traded one religion for another. So, okay, I know that sounds harsh, but you haven't nothing you've really said on your channel has shown that you've overcome the problems that I've articulated here. So I would like to say, to end on a happier note, I'm glad someone has found this channel. I hope to be of service. I will see what happens in the next week. I will be traveling down to Dallas to an invitation-only conference at the Discovery Institute. I probably will talk to my friends at the ICR. There's the Bradley Center down there. There's also friends at University of Texas, Dallas, friends at Baylor. And so I don't know what'll be happening. So I'm preparing for my trip this week. I'll be leaving. I'd like to thank all of my channel supporters and friends who still appreciate what I have to say, despite this fact that some people think I'm a slime ball. They call me Slimy Sal. So God bless you all. Let me close on let me just share some music. Take care. God bless you on this Pentecost Sunday. The grace to my fellow believers out there, the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Amen.